Welcome to another episode of Marcelina, my Reliance 44 sailboat refit update. Well, it's been a long winter, and with less than 50 days until my target departure date of June 1st, I'm long overdue for an update. And yes, you heard me right, June 1st I plan to be pushing off the dock in Rochester, New York to start the first leg of my trip around the world. I'll head across Lake Ontario, down the St. Lawrence Seaway into the Gulf of St. Lawrence, then along the coast of Atlantic Canada before squeezing between mainland Nova Scotia and Cape Breton Island. Ultimately, I'll be heading out across the North Atlantic Ocean, sailing all the way to the Azores. I plan to make landfall on the island of Terceira. After a brief stay, we'll sail on to Madeira, or precisely Porto Santo, just northeast of Madeira. I decided to skip mainland Portugal or Spain for two reasons. First, they're still having problems with orcas playing with rudders of sailboats, and I didn't want to risk my new rudder. Second, because it will help shorten the next leg down to Brazil this coming fall. Besides, my wife is from Madeira. We got married there, and her family still has a home on the island. What better place to complete my first official ocean crossing? To get more open ocean experience, this past November I joined the crew of Sail Libra on a sail from Bermuda to the Virgin Islands. I picked Libra because it's ketched rigged like my own boat, and the skipper has quite a few blue water miles under his belt. This trip was uneventful, which of course is the best kind, and helped to give me more confidence in my own journey. But like I said, it's been a long winter, and long winters are good for getting boat projects done. One of the first projects had to do with the drive batteries for the boat. At the end of last season, my drive batteries just wouldn't turn on, and the manufacturer in China was completely unresponsive. So I found a company near Boston to fix them, including replacing all the control boards and adding a couple of other features to the batteries. The folks at AdCore, where I had them repaired, were very attentive and stayed in touch with me during the whole process. The batteries are back on the boat and awaiting a couple of other items before they're completely reinstalled. One of those other items is the drive shaft. I need to install the drive shaft before I can put the batteries back in, because the batteries sit on top of the drive shaft. I took my old drive shaft, the prop, and the coupling to a shop in Connecticut. They did some measurements and determined I needed a new drive shaft and coupling. I picked those up just a couple of weeks ago and they're ready to reinstall. But those are also waiting another thing that's coming in, and that's a new rudder. I realized the problem I was having with my steering last year was because the top and bottom rudder shaft parts were not lined up properly. It was, after all, the first time I had built a rudder myself. So this time I found a professional, and I had him build a rudder for me. This new rudder should arrive in about a week. It's coming from Idaho, and I know I have no idea why a custom rudder manufacturer would be in Idaho. Maybe it's because it's really beautiful out there. Anyway, once I put the new rudder on, I can put in the new drive shaft, then put in the refurbished batteries. I also added a Hydrovane self-steering system. Although I have a Rewiring autopilot, the Hydrovane works on wind alone and will provide steering on long passages without the need to consume battery power. It also acts as an emergency rudder, although I did need to make a custom tiller handle because the location where the manufacturer's handle goes just happened to line up with my railing. I'm currently in the process of securing a couple of chain plates to the transom as mounting points for a series drogue. A drogue is used in storm conditions to keep the stern to the wind and waves, and ultimately keep the boat from pitch poling should we get hit by a very large breaking wave. I also have a sea anchor, another piece of heavy weather safety gear. In this case, it's deployed off the bow, and unlike the series drogue, it slows the boat down to maybe half a knot, where the drogue will let the boat keep moving in a couple of knots. The sea anchor is generally more difficult to deploy and retrieve, and puts more stress on the attachment points on the boat. But if you've got storm conditions and a lee shore, it may be the only thing between you and the rocks. In my case, I'm setting up the sea anchor to ride about 30 degrees off the bow, which is said to reduce the yawing motion, which can make the boat very uncomfortable. It also turns the keel and rudder partially sideways, which helps create a slick like in being hove to, as well as further reducing the leeway. Some other minor projects that I've completed: I bought and installed the AIS transponder I needed so that I can both receive and transmit vessel course and identification information. It's great out in the open ocean, so you make sure you don't run into other boats, and other boats can see you as well and know where you're going. I rewired the mast. First, I had to re-secure the conduit inside of the main mast, which had broken free and was rattling around, as well as pinching the wires inside the mast down at the bottom. Once that was secured, I reran all the wires and confirmed that the lights, VHF antenna, wind vane wires were all working correctly. I also modified the Starlink mount. My mount on the mizzen for the wind generator and the Starlink antenna wasn't quite wide enough, and the wind generator blades were clipping the corner of the Starlink antenna. I extended the mounting point of the antenna to give it some breathing space. On the mast step, I dug out the old rotting wood that kept the main mast in place and made a new fixture out of pressure-treated wood. Hopefully, this will keep everything snug for quite a while. Oh, and the hot water heater. My hot water heater runs on 110 AC power, and I took the easy route and just plugged it into my inverter. I've never used the water heater in the 8 years I've owned the boat. I'll try once I have the water in the system after launch. I'd say the odds are less than 50-50 that it will actually work. I also rewired the refrigerator. The fridge had been cycling very frequently and never getting down to temperature. I traced the issue to a voltage drop in the wiring. I ended up replacing the wiring with a heavier gauge and taking out 1 or 2 of the butt splices I had in the line. Everything is running fine now. After reading about a boat that had a large window blown out by a wave in a storm, I decided to make a cover for my front hatch. The hatch is decidedly smaller than the boat window that I had read about, and it is a sturdy 1/2-inch thick acrylic. But I didn't want to take any chances, and I made a cover out of 3/4-inch plywood that I'll secure in place for longer passages. On top of the mast, I mounted a static dissipator. This will help make the boat less of a lightning target. Well, I think that covers most of the projects that I've worked on. The boat should be launched in the next couple of weeks, and then I'll have the month of May to test everything out before the real journey begins. My crewmate Joe will also be joining me sometime around mid-May, and we should have a chance to provision the boat and get him up to speed on the basic operation. Oh, I almost forgot. Since I'm going to have internet, I'm thinking about mounting a camera on the boat and live streaming the journey. Tell me your thoughts. Let me know if you think that's a good idea. Thanks, and I'll see you again soon.